What do we talk about when we talk about 1979's iconic outer space slasher, Alien? Personally, I start the list with the incredible slow burn tone and impressive special effects. Then, I usually gush for 20 or 30 minutes about how inspired the horror aspect is, and especially for its time. It creeps along with nothing but quiet, dark spaces to lure out your greatest fears as this mysterious man-eating creature stalks your every move. Truly scary stuff. And then, of course, I mention how Sigourney Weaver swiftly cemented her status as one of the greatest final girls in slasher cinema. All of that to say that this film truly lives up to the chills that they promise from the movie's tagline: in space, no one can hear you scream. Folks, slasher films are kind of a big deal here on the JoBlo Horror Originals channel. We love seeing Ghostface reveal their identities at the end of Scream, and we tune in for the horror of Haddonfield every single Halloween, and of course we sure as shit make sure to cover our fair share of cult slashers that fly below the mainstream radar. But lately, I've had a different kind of itch that I need to scratch. While I'm always in the mood for a little bit of blood and guts, I've been finding myself more in the mood for something a little more out there from the typical hulking monster slasher guy. Now, of course, within the horror genre alone, there are many different avenues that I could go down. See, on this show, I've covered ghosts, demons, cults, witches, haunted artifacts, monsters, serial killers, and even robots. But one thing that I don't feel I have properly covered is aliens.
You just covered the arachnid beasts in your Starship Troopers video. Newsflash, spaceman, those were aliens.
You again? Okay, yeah. Look, you're right. Those were aliens in Starship Troopers.
But imagine if you were a regular astronaut who wasn't properly expecting or properly trained or properly equipped to deal with an alien like this. What if you were in space with no way to get help and this thing had its sights fixed directly on you? Or as writer Dan O'Bannon would say, what if Jaws in space?
Let's not be too hasty. We don't know anything about it.
1979's Alien is the story of a group of astronauts who are headed home to Earth when a potential distress signal sends them to a nearby moon where they discover an alien life that is sure to make their journey home a hell of a lot bloodier. The film was famously directed by Ridley Scott and remains to be one of the greatest horror classics in all of cinema history. And honestly, I can't wait to get into it, so I'm Kier with JoBlo Horror Originals, and you're watching Deconstructing. Now, the setup for Alien is quite simple. We've got 7 astronauts: Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, Captain Dallas, played by Tom Skerritt, Lambert, played by Veronica Cartwright, Kane, played by John Hurt, Ash, played by Ian Holm, and Peter, played by Yaphet Kotto. Oh, and you can't forget Brett, played by Harry Dean Stanton.
Oh, what?
This crew is on the way back to Earth when they get a transmission from a nearby moon. On this moon is the remnants of an alien ship, where the crew finds a chamber full of eggs, and what's inside of those eggs makes its way onto their ship, via Kane's face. This sets up the rest of the film, which sees a rapidly growing alien creature with slimy skin and chrome teeth roaming about the ship and taking out the passengers one by one. A classic plot for a classic movie indeed, but there's more to it than that, so as usual, we're going to be breaking down this movie by way of our 4 key categories. First, we'll talk about the origin of the movie and how it went from just an egg to a still active mega franchise. Then we'll talk about the movie's legacy, which will allow us to dive into what makes it so mega franchisable. After that, we'll play a quick game of JoBlo horror movie trivia to get our movie minds buzzing before we get on to the finale, The X Factor, where I discuss that one small thing that takes Alien from being a space station slasher to being the timeless horror masterpiece that it rightfully is. So, if you're ready, then keep your backs to the wall and don't forget to drop a like on this video. And let's hit play on Alien. Have y'all ever seen the movie Dark Star by John Carpenter? You know, the one where a spray-painted beach ball is haunting a spaceship? Well, as it turns out, Dan O'Bannon worked on that film with Carpenter, and his experience on the film got him thinking, what if there was a fully horror version of this that played it completely straight? And so began the process of writing a script that would feature a handful of victims, an endless hellscape of space, and one very angry alien. O'Bannon knew that the key to making it scary was having a believable looking monster for his antagonist. More on that soon, but with the idea fresh in his mind, O'Bannon wrote the first act of a script called Memory, which actually turned out to be used as the film's iconic opening scene, which features our astronauts waking up to a distress transmission and deciding to investigate a broken down ship. After this, O'Bannon was stuck with a serious case of writer's block after the incredible beginning of the script. So, while working on other projects and leaving Memory on the back burner, O'Bannon discovered the haunting artwork of H.R. Giger. Giger is known for his incredibly disturbing and unflattering imagery that was a hot commodity for authors to use as book covers in the sci-fi genre. Around this time, O'Bannon moved to LA to live with Ronald Shusett, the film's uncredited co-writer, and the two wrote the rest of the script about one of H.R. Giger's horror creations stalking and killing the astronauts. Giger would of course go on to create the now iconic Xenomorph for the film.
Seems to have life. Organic life.
With a dark and bloody script in hand, Shusett and O'Bannon began shopping their movie around Hollywood, hoping to get enough capital to make a convincing Giger monster. Along comes Brandywine Entertainment, which consisted of producers Gordon Carroll, David Giler, and Walter Hill. They agreed to make the movie, but throughout the process, they would make the development of the final screenplay a living hell by demanding absurd rewrites, rearranging material, and ultimately putting their own stamp on an otherwise great script. It is believed by many, including O'Bannon, that the studio heads in Brandywine were trying to edge their work in just enough to take credit and leave the writers with nothing. And with O'Bannon being the sole credit writer on this movie, I guess we know who won that battle.
Well, you get what you contracted for like everybody else.
When it came down to it, the then recent release of a little film called Star Wars got studios in Hollywood bursting at the seams to start releasing original sci-fi blockbusters of their own. This caused Brandywine and O'Bannon and Shusett to begin their search for a proper director. After going through the list of potential talent to helm the movie, names like Robert Altman, Jack Clayton, Robert Aldrich, and Peter Yates all proved to be too slick, and the studio and writers feared that hiring them would run the risk of making the film seem less serious. They wanted somebody who would approach this thing as a straight-up horror movie. And luckily, when Brandywine saw the film The Duelist, they knew just who to seek out. Brandywine pursued Ridley Scott to direct the film, and Scott loved the script so much that he signed on immediately and even contributed some insanely detailed and gorgeous storyboards to the project. These things are incredibly detailed, and it really helped build the grand scale of this film from the very beginning. In fact, they were so good that upon seeing them, Brandywine decided to double the budget from an original $4.2 to a then $8.5 million. Which of course later turned into something more like $11.5 million, but if you ask me, it's money well spent.
Duty. And what about the money? If you want to give me some money to do, I'd be happy to, oblige.
The casting process was fairly simple due to the script's writing being intentionally vague in its description of the astronauts. The intent was for the director to feel free to interpret each character in their own way, even as far as gender and physical attributes, and then cast accordingly. This gave Ridley the freedom to find the most powerful actors for each role, and that's how we got Sigourney Weaver as Ripley. Right on. With the main players in the mix, cameras were finally ready to roll in Shepperton Studios in London in 1978. Now, it's no secret that the Alien franchise has seen quite a robust history. The film was released in May of 1979 and was met with astonishing box office numbers. The film was such a hit that people were seeing it twice and bringing more and more friends with them each time. Alien's final box office run totaled at over $180 million, which in Hollywood terms means...
No, Aliens is a classic, okay? Get away from her, you bitch!
In 1986, James Cameron took on a direct sequel titled Aliens, which would also see the return of Ripley. As if two iconic directors weren't enough for this franchise, none other than David Fincher stepped up to direct Alien 3 in 1992, which also saw Ripley come back and, spoiler alert, die, only to be brought back again in Alien Resurrection in 97 as a clone. These direct sequels did do well, but the time between each film and the return on investment eventually led to the franchise fizzling out in theaters. But it did gain a lot of traction in the comic book and collectible space. This of course led to the beloved Alien vs. Predator comic book, which later revived the silver screen slasher with AVP in 2004 and AVP Requiem in 2007. Now, you might be thinking that like 6 films and a whole slew of multimedia opportunities is probably enough for this franchise. I mean, surely there would be no need to... That's right, folks. Alien tried its hand at the prequel thing with Prometheus, and later went on to bring us Alien Covenant and the highly anticipated Fede Alvarez-directed Alien Romulus, which hopefully looks to bring the franchise back to being more grounded. No pun intended. But what makes the movie worth the trip to the theaters every time for follow-up films? Why did the original Alien spawn such a huge success? Well, because it was made the right way.
What else?
On its own and away from the franchise, Alien delivered us stunning cinematography that invites you directly into the ship with the crew. I mean, the Blu-ray of this thing is beautiful, folks, trust me. But what about the chilling slow burn tone and pacing? The movie lets you kind of float around the ship in suspense with the cast for a lot of this film. And personally, I find it delightful either way, but what really makes it special is that even in these slow moments, you're treated to a warm and grounded group dynamic between the characters that makes the dialogue scenes that much more gripping. It's truly a movie you can just sit and vibe with, and I think that says a lot.
This thing bled acid, who knows what it's gonna do when it's dead?
I think it's safe to assume it isn't a zombie.
The movie's legacy goes beyond a good movie and a pretty good franchise. Alien was such a shockwave of a film that the impact of it on the genre can still be felt in movies today. While Scott would call it the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in space, science fiction has benefited the most from this film's influence. Movies like Galaxy of Terror, Inseminoid, Forbidden World, and Dead Space. The reach even extends to recent films like Underwater and Life, which are essentially the same movie but with different monsters. And honestly, both of those movies are alright, so check them out.
Yes, well, it's adapted remarkably well to our atmosphere, considering its nutritional requirements.
And while it's easy to say that Alien inspired dozens of movies over the years, let's also not forget that part of this movie's charm is the familiar nature of the otherwise brand new concept. When talking about the film, Dan O'Bannon said, quote,
"I didn't steal Alien from anybody. I stole it from everybody."
Alien was a mashup of ideas, notably taken from films like Forbidden Planet, Planet of Vampires, and multiple EC comics from the time. These old-time science fiction films give me a sense of nostalgia that Alien also touches on in the same way, and I think that must be true for many of us, seeing as the film is rightfully ranked up there with the best of them.
Whenever he says anything, you say right, Brett. You know that?
Right.
Did you know that originally there was a scene written for the end of the movie where the alien sees Ripley hiding in the closet while she's undressed and then becomes strangely aroused by that? This would cause the alien to note the difference in their bodies and add a disturbing nature to the end of the movie. Luckily, it was cut from the film and the ending stands out as it should. Not gross.
I got you. You son of a bitch.
And speaking of that creepy little xenomorph, let's see if you can answer this question. Which famous painter inspired the iconic chest buster scene, which has gone on to be the film's most memorable sequence? Was it A. Thomas Kincaid, B. Francis Bacon, C. Ivan Plush, or D. Ferris Heiser? Comment your answers down below. I can't believe it's that time already, folks. We're at the X Factor, and this is where I'm supposed to pick one small and seemingly meaningless thing and crown it as the most important. And usually I'll struggle around looking for just one thing, and then I'll have this grand revelation right at the buzzer. And yeah, it's no different this time because originally the X Factor seemed obvious. The practical effects, right? The way that this terrifying creature was brought to life was both impressive for the time and honestly impressive for today as well. Today, you would never see a movie of this magnitude risk puppeteering their only villain and engineering it to move smoothly. And most of it was practical, but the digital effects that were used were still very good, and this thing really holds up. But we expect that, so I can't give it the X Factor. And for the same reason, I almost wanted to give Sigourney Weaver the X Factor, but it was too obvious. Although she really did do an amazing job and really owns this movie.
This is Ripley, last survivor of the Nostromo. Signing off.
But what it's really all about for me, and what really makes the movie a beacon for quality sci-fi seekers, is the film's final showdown. Now, yes, this may seem obvious as well, but what makes the final confrontation different from any of the other ones we've seen in the 7 films since? It's quiet. The movie's slow buildup does lead to a triumphant climax, but that's not the end. The movie truly ends with Ripley thinking she's finally ditched the xenomorph after losing her entire crew. But then, she realizes that that thing is still on her ship, knocked out. Instead of blaring music, flashing lights, and a CGI purple energy beam, Ripley slowly and quietly sneaks into the closet, suits up, and blasts the ship's thrusters to expel the alien from the ship. But it's done in stealth. She doesn't scream, she doesn't fight, she doesn't blink, she barely even breathes. It's very satisfying. It feels like you quietly snuck up on that scary spider that's been crawling around your room at night, and it's definitely the reason that this movie sticks the landing. Folks, we did it. We talked about Alien, and I can now add the xenomorph to my ever-expanding list of creepy horror creatures that have been deconstructed on the show, and I'm very happy about that. But as always, I want to hear from you guys, so make sure you comment down below what other movies and creatures you'd love to see deconstructed here on the channel, and of course make sure you like and subscribe for the very best in horror movie content. I better get out of here. I'm getting sleepy. Bye everybody.
Let's get the hell out of here.